They thought I'd quietly accept being pushed aside after saving them $88 million. They forgot one thing: I wrote my own contract, and buried deep in it was the key to their downfall. My name is Aaron Kessler, and this is how their greed turned into my greatest opportunity. The moment I knew everything was about to change wasn't when they demoted me. It wasn't when they excluded me from the contract signing ceremony after my work had secured the deal. It wasn't even when Bradley Monroe walked into our Salt Lake City headquarters with his expensive suit and condescending smile. No. I knew things would change the moment I saw my boss's eyes dart away from mine during our quarterly review meeting. That subtle aversion of gaze told me what was coming before any words were spoken. After 4 years of transforming Northbridge Systems from a struggling energy tech startup to an industry darling poised for IPO, I was about to become expendable. I'm Aaron Kessler, 36, former Director of Strategic Operations at Northbridge Systems. Former. Still stings to say that, even now. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 4 years ago, I left a lucrative position on Wall Street to join Northbridge, a company with a mission I believed in: reducing industrial energy waste through innovative technology. While my colleagues on Wall Street were financing another oil well or coal plant, I wanted to be part of the solution. Northbridge promised that opportunity with their cutting-edge approach to energy efficiency. My background was unique among the Northbridge leadership team. Most came from engineering or tech backgrounds, while I brought financial expertise and operational experience from my time at Goldman Sachs. I understood the language of efficiency, cost-cutting, and strategic planning in ways that complemented the technical brilliance of my new colleagues. The CEO, Martin Reynolds, recruited me personally after we met at a clean energy conference in Denver. "We have the technology," he told me over coffee, "but we need someone who can translate that into business success. Someone who can build the systems that will let us scale." His vision was compelling, and I was ready for a change. Salt Lake City was a world away from Manhattan. Trading skyscrapers for mountain views, honking taxis for hiking trails. The transition was jarring at first, but I quickly fell in love with the lifestyle change. My apartment overlooked the Wasatch Range, and I could be on a trail within 20 minutes of leaving my front door. The clean air cleared my mind in ways I hadn't experienced in years. Northbridge's offices reflected the company's ethos: open, modern spaces with abundant natural light, nestled in a renovated warehouse on the outskirts of downtown. Solar panels covered the roof, and the building utilized their own energy management systems. It was a living showcase of their technology. My first 6 months were challenging. I was the outsider, the finance person among engineers, the East Coast transplant in Utah, the woman in an executive team that skewed heavily male. But I thrived on challenges. Always had. My role began with streamlining operations. Northbridge had brilliant ideas but lacked the infrastructure to implement them efficiently. I reorganized departments, introduced new project management methodologies, and created accountability systems that reduced waste, not just energy waste, but time and resources too. By the end of my first year, we'd reduced operational overhead by 22% while increasing output. Martin was thrilled, the board was impressed, and I was just getting started. The real breakthrough came in my second year. While reviewing supply chain data, I noticed patterns of energy consumption that fluctuated in ways that couldn't be explained by normal operations. Working with our engineering team, I developed a hypothesis: micro-inefficiencies throughout the supply chain were creating cumulative waste that was nearly invisible when looking at individual nodes, but massive when viewed systemically. I pitched a radical idea to Martin: what if we created an AI-driven system that could monitor energy consumption at the device level, identifying waste in real time and automatically adjusting for optimal efficiency? "How much would this cost to develop?" he asked, skepticism evident in his voice. "About $7 million for the initial development," I replied. "But I project first-year savings of $20 million, with exponential growth after that as the AI learns and improves." He gave me the green light, though with considerable reservation. "This is on you, Aaron. Make it work." And I did. I assembled a team of data scientists, engineers, and operational experts. We worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week, for 4 months straight. I practically lived at the office, fueled by a belief in what we were creating and the impact it could have. The system we developed, which we called Efficiencies, exceeded even my optimistic projections. In its first year of implementation, it saved Northbridge $38 million in direct costs. By the second year, that figure had climbed to $50 million, bringing the total to $88 million. The system didn't just cut costs, it revolutionized how industrial energy usage could be monitored and optimized. Our success caught the attention of ESG investment funds, those focusing on environmental, social, and governance factors. Suddenly, Northbridge wasn't just another tech company. We were a darling of the sustainable investment community. Our valuation tripled in 18 months. The crowning achievement came when the Department of Energy announced a competitive contract worth $350 million to implement energy-saving technologies across federal facilities. Efficiencies was the cornerstone of our bid. The technical specifications I had helped develop, the case studies from our existing clients, and the projected savings models I created formed the backbone of our proposal. When the DOE announced Northbridge as the winner, it should have been the highlight of my career. Instead, it was the beginning of the end. I wasn't invited to the contract signing ceremony in Washington. When I asked Martin about it, he mumbled something about limited spots and technical focus for this phase. I swallowed my disappointment and focused on implementation planning. After all, I told myself, this was about the mission, not personal recognition. Martin assured me that my contributions were valued. After the IPO, he said, placing a paternal hand on my shoulder, "We'll be restructuring the executive team. VP of Operations has your name on it. Aaron?" I believed him. Why wouldn't I? I'd helped build Northbridge from a promising startup to a company on the verge of a billion-dollar IPO. My systems had saved them $88 million. My technology had secured the biggest contract in company history. I had earned my place. Then Bradley Monroe arrived. Bradley was hired as our new COO 6 months before the planned IPO. He came from Petrocon Industries, an old-guard fossil fuel company that had been making half-hearted attempts to greenwash its image. His resume boasted of streamlining operations and preparing companies for public offering, the same corporate speak I could have used on my own CV. From our first meeting, I sensed trouble. Bradley had a way of looking through me rather than at me. When I presented the quarterly efficiency numbers, he asked questions that revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of our technology. Yet he spoke with the confidence of someone who couldn't conceive of being wrong. "Impressive systems," he said after my presentation, in a tone that suggested the opposite. "Very technical." 3 weeks after Bradley's arrival, Martin called me into his office. Bradley was already there, seated comfortably in one of the leather chairs facing Martin's desk. The body language between them told me everything before a word was spoken. Martin's slumped shoulders, Bradley's forward-leaning posture. The power dynamic had shifted. "Aaron, thanks for coming in," Martin began, not quite meeting my eyes. "We wanted to discuss the organizational restructuring ahead of the IPO." I took the empty seat, back straight, face neutral. Years of Wall Street negotiations had taught me never to show weakness. "Bradley has been reviewing our executive structure," Martin continued, "and he's identified some adjustments that will make us more attractive to investors." Bradley took over smoothly. "Aaron, your contributions to Northbridge have been significant," he said, using the past tense in a way that made my stomach tighten. "Particularly on the technical systems side, your expertise in operational efficiency is unquestioned." I knew what was coming. This was the corporate equivalent of, "It's not you, it's me," the preamble to a breakup. As we prepare for life as a public company, we need to reorganize for scalability. Bradley continued, "We're creating a new position that we believe will better utilize your unique talents, Technical Advisory Director, reporting to the COO." My face remained impassive, but my mind was racing. Technical Advisory Director. A made-up title with the word director tacked on to make it sound equivalent to my current role. Reporting to the COO to Bradley. A demotion disguised as a lateral move. And my current role? I asked, my voice steady. We're bringing in Janet Colson as the new Director of Strategic Operations. Bradley replied. She has extensive experience with public companies and investor relations. Janet Colson, I knew the name. She had worked with Bradley at Petrocon. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This will allow you to focus on what you do best, Martin interjected, finally finding his voice. The technical innovation that's been so valuable to us. No more getting bogged down in management duties. I looked at Martin, my mentor and ally for 4 years, now avoiding my gaze. And the VP position after the IPO? I asked. A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. The executive structure post-IPO is still being finalized, he said. Bradley is leading that planning. I turned to Bradley, who smiled thinly. We'll be announcing the executive team approximately 1 month before going public. I can assure you that technical expertise will be appropriately represented. Technical expertise, not me, my expertise. The distinction was subtle but unmistakable. I left that meeting in a daze. 4 years of dedication, $88 million in savings. A revolutionary system that had secured a government contract worth hundreds of millions, and I was being sidelined. Pushed into a technical advisory role, while Bradley brought in his own people to take credit for my work. For 24 hours, I cycled through emotions, shock, anger, betrayal, grief. I barely slept. I went hiking at dawn, pushing myself up steep trails until my legs burned and my lungs ached, trying to clear my head. By the following evening, the initial emotional storm had passed, leaving behind clarity. I remembered something crucial, something that Bradley and possibly even Martin had forgotten. I had negotiated my own contract when I joined Northbridge. Before joining Northbridge, I had been Goldman Sachs' youngest vice president in their operations division. I understood contracts intimately, and I knew that in startup environments, where cash was tight and equity was the real compensation, protecting yourself was essential. My original employment contract with Northbridge contained several provisions I'd insisted upon. The most important was what I privately called my parachute clause, an exit provision that protected me in case of demotion or fundamental role change without cause. The clause stated that if my role was substantially altered or reduced without documented performance issues, I would be entitled to immediate vesting of all stock options granted to date, plus retention of partial intellectual property rights to any systems I developed during my tenure. This last part was critical. When we created fictionalized, I'd structured the IP rights carefully. Northbridge owned the system as implemented, but I retained rights to the underlying algorithmic approach and certain key authentication components. In essence, I held the keys to the kingdom, a fact that had seemed inconsequential when I was a valued member of the leadership team headed for a VP position. That night, I pulled out my contract and reread it carefully. The language was clear. My demotion to Technical Advisory Director constituted a substantial role change without cause. I had received nothing but positive performance reviews. In fact, my last review had specifically praised my instrumental role in securing the DOE contract. The exit clause was valid and enforceable, but executing it would be a declaration of war against a company I'd helped build. People I had worked alongside for years. I needed to be certain. I spent the weekend weighing my options. I could accept the demotion, swallow my pride, and hope that my contributions would eventually be recognized. I could fight the reassignment through internal channels, appealing to the board of directors. Or I could trigger the exit clause and walk away with my equity and IP rights intact. By Monday morning, I had made my decision. If Northbridge no longer valued me, I would not fight to stay where I wasn't wanted, but I would ensure that I received what I had earned. I contacted Sarah Lindstrom, a former colleague from Goldman who had transitioned to employment law. I explained my situation and sent her my contract for review. "This is solid, Aaron," she said after reviewing the documents. "The language is unambiguous, and there's clear documentation of your role in developing the fictionalized platform. If you want to pursue this, I believe we have a strong position." "What's the best approach?" I asked. "A formal letter citing the contract terms and asserting your rights," she advised. Give them the opportunity to correct the situation before we escalate. But be prepared, they may not take this well. That was an understatement. I knew how Northbridge would react with disbelief, then anger, then panic when they realized the implications for their DOE contract and upcoming IPO. Sarah drafted the letter, which I reviewed and approved. It was professional, unemotional, and devastatingly clear. Northbridge had breached our agreement by substantially changing my role without cause, triggering the exit clause. I was exercising my rights to immediate vesting of all equity and retention of specified IP components. The letter included a 72-hour deadline for a response. The letter was delivered to Martin, Bradley, and the head of HR on Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, my email access was cut off. By Wednesday morning, security personnel were stationed near my office. No one spoke to me directly. I was treated like a contagion. Martin finally called on Thursday evening, 50 hours after receiving the letter. "Aaron, we need to talk," he said, his voice tight. "This is all a misunderstanding." "I don't see any ambiguity in my contract," I replied calmly, "or in what happened in your office last week." "The restructuring is for the good of the company," he insisted. "We're not pushing you out, we're refocusing your role to leverage your technical strengths." My technical strengths, as you call them, saved Northbridge $88 million and secured the DOE contract, I said. Those same strengths are now apparently worth a demotion and reporting to Bradley's friend from Petricon. That's not fair. Aaron, Janet has impressive credentials. Martin, I interrupted. This isn't about Janet. It's about the agreement we made when I joined Northbridge. I upheld my end, I transformed your operations, built a revolutionary system, and positioned the company for success. Now you're changing the terms, and I'm exercising my contractual rights. The IP claims in your letter, those could derail the DOE implementation. You can't seriously be threatening that. I'm not threatening anything, I said. I'm stating facts. The authentication protocols for efficient SIS require tokens that are under my control. As specified in the development agreement, that was acceptable to Northbridge when I was Director of Strategic Operations. If it's no longer acceptable, that's a consequence of your decisions, not mine. Silence stretched between us. Finally, Martin spoke again, his voice weary. What do you want, Aaron? It was the question I'd been waiting for. I want what I'm entitled to under my contract. Complete vesting of all equity grants to date. Acknowledgement of my IP rights to the specified components of efficient SIS, and a severance package commensurate with my contributions to Northbridge. The board won't agree to that, he said. Then I'll see you in court, and I'll deactivate my authentication tokens as specified in my rights retention agreement. I replied, how do you think the DOE will react when they learn that the system they're paying $350 million for has been compromised because Northbridge violated an employment agreement? Another long silence. I'll take your terms to the board, he finally said. But Aaron, this isn't you. We built something special here. Don't throw that away over pride. His words stung because they revealed how little he understood me after 4 years. This isn't about pride, Martin. It's about respect and fairness. I gave everything to Northbridge. In return, you let Bradley push me aside when it was convenient. That was your choice. Now I'm making mine. I hung up and stared out my apartment window at the mountains, now shadowed in the evening light. I had drawn my line in the sand. There was no going back. The next morning, a Friday, Northbridge was hosting a crucial meeting with potential Series D investors. These were the big players whose investment would carry the company to IPO. The presentation would showcase efficiencies and its implementation for the DOE contract, my work, now being presented by others. At 7:30 a.m., 2 hours before the investor meeting, I executed the final step of my exit strategy. From my home computer, I accessed the secure server that housed my authentication tokens for the Efficient SIS platform. These tokens verified the integrity of the data flowing through the system. Without them, the AI would continue to function, but its accuracy would degrade rapidly. I didn't disable the system entirely. That would have been destructive and potentially dangerous for the facilities already using it. Instead, I removed the validation protocols that ensured data integrity. The system would continue running, but its recommendations and efficiency calculations would become increasingly erratic. By 9:00 a.m., when the investor presentation began, the dashboard displays would still look normal. By 9:30, subtle discrepancies would appear. By 10:00, those discrepancies would be significant enough to raise questions from any knowledgeable observer. I went hiking that morning. My phone turned off. I climbed higher than usual, pushing myself until I reached a viewpoint overlooking the city. Sitting on a boulder, catching my breath, I felt a strange mixture of sorrow and liberation. A chapter of my life was ending, but a new one was beginning on my terms. When I turned my phone back on that afternoon, I had 17 missed calls and 23 text messages. Most were from Martin, growing increasingly desperate as the morning progressed. The last one, sent at 11:42 a.m., was brief. Board meeting emergency session 1 p.m. Your terms accepted, call me. I didn't call. Instead, I forwarded the message to Sarah with instructions to prepare the formal settlement agreement. Then I turned my phone off again and continued my hike, giving myself time to process the magnitude of what had just happened. By Monday morning, the settlement was being finalized. Northbridge agreed to all my terms, immediate vesting of my equity worth approximately $1.4 million at the last valuation, recognition of my IP rights to key components of Efficient-Sys, and a severance package of $2 million. In return, I would restore the authentication tokens and provide a 60-day transition consultation. The agreement included a mutual non-disparagement clause, but word spread quickly through industry channels. The investor meeting had been a disaster. 2 major funds had pulled out after witnessing the Efficient-Sys anomalies, questioning the company's technical stability. The Series D round, projected to raise $75 million, had secured only $42 million, barely enough to maintain operations through the DOE contract implementation. I fulfilled my consultation obligations professionally, working remotely and interacting primarily with the technical team. I never spoke to Bradley again. Martin reached out once, asking to meet for coffee, to clear the air. I declined politely. As I helped the technical team understand the authentication protocols I had designed, I felt a twinge of regret for the collateral damage my actions had caused. Good people at Northbridge, people who had worked alongside me for years, were facing uncertainty because of the failed funding round. But I reminded myself that the responsibility ultimately lay with Martin and Bradley, who had chosen to discard a key contributor for political reasons. With my settlement finalized and my consultation period complete, I faced a decision: what next? I had financial security. With nearly $3.5 million between my vested equity and severance, I could take time off, travel, maybe even return to Wall Street with my enhanced resume. But the experience with Northbridge had awakened something in me, a desire to build something of my own, something that reflected my values without compromise. The energy efficiency space was still largely untapped, with massive potential for environmental impact and financial returns. And I now had both the expertise and the seed capital to enter it independently. 3 months after leaving Northbridge, I founded Kessler Insight Labs. Our mission: creating next-generation energy optimization systems for industrial applications. I leased a modest office space in downtown Salt Lake City, not far from Northbridge's headquarters. It was a deliberate choice, a statement that I wasn't running away. Starting from scratch was both terrifying and exhilarating. I had no safety net, no corporate infrastructure to lean on. Every decision, from office furniture to hiring policies, was mine to make. The freedom was intoxicating after years of navigating corporate politics. My first hire was Raj Patel, a brilliant data scientist who had been marginalized at Northbridge due to his unconventional approach to problem solving. When I called him about joining Kessler Insight Labs, he didn't hesitate. "I watched what happened to you," he told me. "How they pushed aside the person who created their golden goose. I've been waiting for your call." Raj brought 2 more team members with him: Lee Chen, a systems architect who had worked on Efficient-Sys, and Maya Hernandez, a UX designer who specialized in making complex data accessible to non-technical users. Both had become disillusioned with Northbridge's direction under Bradley's influence. With my core team assembled, we began developing a new platform. Rather than simply recreating efficiencies, we aimed to surpass it, addressing limitations I had identified but never had the opportunity to fix at Northbridge. Our system, which we named Quantum Save, incorporated advanced machine learning techniques that went beyond identifying waste to predicting and preventing it. Securing our first client was the biggest hurdle. Despite my track record, Kessler Insight Labs was an unproven startup competing against established players, including Northbridge. We needed a reference client who could validate our approach. I leveraged every industry contact I had, eventually securing a meeting with Western Polymers, a mid-sized manufacturing company that had been considering Northbridge before their funding issues became public. Their CEO, David Chen, was initially skeptical but intrigued by our pitch. "What makes your system different from what Northbridge offers?" he asked during our presentation. "Three key factors," I replied. First, predictive capabilities that identify potential inefficiencies before they occur, rather than just monitoring existing ones. Second, a more intuitive interface designed for operational staff, not just engineers. And third, I added with a small smile, the original architect of the technology is directly involved in your implementation, not sidelined in a consultation role. David laughed at that. Touché. But what about stability? We've heard about issues with Northbridge's system. Those issues stemmed from authentication protocols that were under my control. I explained candidly, Quantum Save has a distributed authentication system with no single point of failure. Moreover, we're offering performance-based pricing. We only get paid based on the energy savings we actually deliver. 2 weeks later, Western Polymers signed a 12-month contract worth $1.8 million. It was a fraction of what Northbridge would have charged, but it gave us what we needed, most a reference client and operational cash flow. The Western Polymers implementation exceeded expectations. Within 3 months, their energy costs dropped by 28%, compared to the 18 to 22% we had projected. David became our most vocal advocate, connecting us with other potential clients in his industry network. By the 6-month mark, Kessler Insight Labs had secured 7 client contracts, including 2 former Northbridge prospects who had backed away during their funding turmoil. Our team had grown to 23 people, and we had moved to larger offices to accommodate our expansion. I made a point of creating the company culture I'd always wanted but never found. We implemented 4-day work weeks, unlimited vacation policies with minimums, not just maximums, and a profit-sharing structure that gave every employee equity from day one. Our hiring focused on talent and cultural fit rather than conventional credentials, resulting in a diverse team that brought varied perspectives to every challenge. 9 months after founding Kessler Insight Labs, I received an invitation to speak at the European Clean Energy Summit in Berlin. The topic, Disruption from Within: How Entrepreneurial Thinking Drives Energy Innovation. It was validation on an international stage, recognition that went beyond my former role at Northbridge. In Berlin, I met investors, potential clients, and industry leaders from around the world. My keynote address, which tactfully avoided mentioning Northbridge by name while clearly drawing on that experience, received a standing ovation. I spoke about the tension between corporate structures and innovation, the importance of valuing technical expertise in leadership, and the untapped potential of AI in energy optimization. After my presentation, I was approached by Sophia Bergström, Managing Director of Scandinavian Green Fund, one of Europe's largest sustainable investment vehicles. "Your story resonates with many in this industry," she told me over coffee. The engineer who became a business leader was pushed aside and then created something better on her own terms. It's a powerful narrative. "I didn't set out to create a narrative," I replied. "I just wanted to build something meaningful and be treated fairly in the process." Sophia smiled. Those simple desires often lead to the most compelling journeys. My fund is interested in supporting the next phase of yours if you're looking for investment. I hadn't been actively seeking funding, preferring to grow organically through client revenue. But Sophia's offer opened new possibilities for accelerated research and international expansion. By the time I left Berlin, we had a preliminary agreement for a $25 million investment at a $180 million valuation, a figure that acknowledged both our current success and future potential. As Kessler Insight Labs thrived, Northbridge struggled. Without the complete functionality of Efficientsys, their DOE contract implementation faced continuous challenges. They attempted to rebuild the authentication system I had designed, but without the underlying algorithmic approach that remained my intellectual property, their efforts yielded a poor substitute. The system's efficiency degraded over time, leading to increased client complaints and several contract cancellations. 6 months after my departure, Bradley Monroe resigned as COO. The official announcement cited personal reasons, but industry insiders reported that the board had launched an investigation into his restructuring decisions and their impact on the company's technical capabilities. Martin reached out again after Bradley's resignation. This time with a surprising proposal, Northbridge wanted to license the authentication technology from Kessler Insight Labs. He proposed a generous royalty structure and emphasized the jobs that could be saved if Northbridge regained technical stability. The offer was tempting, both financially and as a form of vindication. But I declined. "I'm building something new now," I told Martin. "And I think the market is better served by having two strong competitors rather than helping Northbridge regain its monopoly position." He didn't argue, just sighed heavily. "I made a mistake, Aaron. I let Bradley convince me that we needed to reshape the company for investors, that technical people couldn't be the face of a public company. I forgot what made Northbridge special in the first place." "I appreciate you saying that," I replied, meaning it, "but it doesn't change where we are now." "No," he agreed. "I suppose it doesn't." 1 year after my departure, Northbridge announced that its IPO plans were indefinitely postponed. 3 months later, they were acquired by GreenTech Solutions, a larger competitor, for $380 million. About 40% of their valuation before the Series D funding troubles. I felt no satisfaction at Northbridge's downfall. Too many good people had been affected. People who had nothing to do with Bradley's decisions or Martin's weakness in opposing them. But I did feel a sense of closure. The chapter was finally complete. Meanwhile, Kessler Insight Labs continued its rapid growth. 18 months after our founding, we had 42 clients across North America and Europe, a team of 78 people, and a new headquarters building powered entirely by renewable energy. Our valuation had reached $280 million, with me retaining 82% ownership, a stake worth nearly $230 million on paper. More important than the financial success was the impact we were making. Our clients had collectively reduced their carbon emissions by over 1.2 million tons annually, equivalent to taking 260,000 cars off the road. We had created a scholarship program for women pursuing STEM careers and launched an incubator for energy innovation startups, paying forward the opportunity I'd created from adversity. When CNBC requested an interview for their Disruptors series, I initially hesitated. I had avoided media attention, preferring to let our results speak for themselves. But the producer's pitch intrigued me. They wanted to explore the broader implications of my journey for corporate innovation and leadership diversity. The interview took place in our Salt Lake City headquarters, with the Wasatch Mountains visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind me. The interviewer, Jessica Chen, had done her homework, asking thoughtful questions that went beyond the superficial narrative of corporate betrayal and revenge. "You've built an impressive company in just 18 months," she noted. "Do you think this would have happened if you hadn't been pushed out of your previous position?" I considered the question carefully. "Probably not," I admitted. I was committed to Northbridge's mission and would have continued contributing there if circumstances had been different. Sometimes the worst moments in our careers create the opening for something better, but that doesn't justify the poor leadership decisions that create those moments. "Many viewers will see your story as a testament to resilience," Jessica said. "What would you say to someone facing similar challenges in their career?" "Know your value," I replied without hesitation. "Document your contributions. Understand your legal position. And remember that sometimes the best response to being undervalued is to create a context where your value is undeniable. Any regrets about how things played out? I smiled slightly. I regret that it became necessary to assert my rights so forcefully. I regret the uncertainty it created for many former colleagues. But I don't regret standing up for myself or building Kessler Insight Labs. Saving them $88 million wasn't enough because I wasn't what they expected in leadership. But now, I lead my own company. And I make sure no one ever gets pushed aside just because they don't fit someone else's mold. After the interview aired, my inbox flooded with messages from people sharing similar experiences across various industries. Some were seeking advice, others simply wanted to express solidarity. I was struck by how common the pattern was: technical experts, particularly women and minorities, being sidelined when companies transitioned to more traditional leadership structures. I began speaking more frequently at conferences and universities, sharing not just technical insights about energy efficiency, but lessons about corporate governance, equitable leadership, and the value of diverse perspectives in executive roles. My message resonated particularly with young women in STEM fields, who saw in my journey both a warning and an inspiration. 2 years after founding Kessler Insight Labs, we launched our most ambitious project yet, a collaborative platform that allowed companies to pool anonymized energy usage data, creating a massive dataset for our AI to analyze. The collective intelligence approach identified efficiency patterns that would have been invisible when looking at individual companies, leading to breakthrough insights about optimal energy usage across different industries and regions. The platform, which we named Collective Save, quickly became the industry standard, with over 200 companies participating within 6 months of launch. The environmental impact was staggering, an additional 15% efficiency improvement beyond what our individual implementations had achieved, translating to millions of tons of carbon emissions avoided. Northbridge, now a division of Green Tech Solutions, eventually became a Collective Save participant. Martin had left after the acquisition, but many of my former colleagues remained. There was a certain symmetry to it, the company that had pushed me aside now benefiting from the innovation that push had inadvertently created. 3 years after leaving Northbridge, I received an unexpected letter from Bradley Monroe. He had moved to a consulting role after leaving Northbridge, but had struggled to rebuild his reputation in the industry. His note was brief, but sincere: an apology for his role in my demotion, and an acknowledgement that his actions had ultimately damaged both Northbridge and his own career. I appreciated his gesture, but didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, don't need to be rebuilt. My focus remained firmly on the future, not the past. That future expanded beyond what I could have imagined during those dark days after my demotion. Kessler Insight Labs grew into Kessler Energy Solutions, a global leader in industrial energy optimization with offices in 12 countries. We went public 3 years after our founding, at a valuation of $1.2 billion, the IPO that Northbridge never achieved. Standing on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange as our symbol KES appeared on the big board, I thought about the journey that had brought me there, from Wall Street to Salt Lake City and back again, from employee to entrepreneur, from someone who saved a company $88 million, only to be pushed aside to the founder of a billion-dollar enterprise creating positive environmental impact worldwide. The story could have ended differently. If I hadn't negotiated my original contract carefully, if I had accepted the demotion without resistance, if I had lacked the courage to start over, any of these alternative paths would have led to a different outcome. The lesson wasn't that betrayal leads to triumph, but that preparation and self-advocacy create options when faced with injustice. In my keynote address at the World Economic Forum 5 years after founding Kessler Energy Solutions, I reflected on this journey and its broader implications for business leadership. The traditional corporate hierarchy often creates blind spots. I told the audience of global leaders, when technical expertise is subordinated to management credentials, when diverse perspectives are sidelined in favor of familiar faces, organizations lose more than they realize. They lose innovation, they lose insight, and ultimately, they lose value. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces representing the world's most powerful companies and institutions. My company exists because another company couldn't see the value of technical leadership. I continued. That's not a unique story. It happens every day in organizations around the world. The question for everyone in this room is what innovations, what billion-dollar ideas, what world-changing solutions are you losing because you're not listening to the right voices in your organization? The question hung in the air, uncomfortable and necessary. I saw nods of recognition, furrowed brows of reflection. Maybe, just maybe, my story would help prevent similar mistakes in other companies, creating space for diverse leadership before valuable contributors were forced to create that space for themselves. As I left the stage to resounding applause, I felt a sense of completion. The wound of betrayal had long since healed, transformed into the foundation of something far greater than what I had lost. The exit clause they had forgotten had opened the door not just to compensation, but to the creation of a company, a culture, and a career defined by my own terms. They demoted me after I saved them $88 million. In doing so, they inadvertently set me free to save billions more, building something that reflected not just my technical expertise, but my values. Sometimes the worst decisions others make for us lead to the best decisions we make for ourselves. That has been the unexpected gift of my journey and the legacy I hope to leave for those who face similar crossroads in their own. My name is Aaron Kessler, and this is how their greed turned into my greatest opportunity.